Good evening, everybody. Meteorologist Nicholas Snider here. This is First Alert Plus. Today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. We are talking about quite a bit of active weather that will begin heading our way as we head into the end of this week. Let's talk about it. Three big things we're talking about, of course, flood concerns. Moving on in, that's going to be the biggest threat. We'll tell you where and how much rain we are expecting. We're also talking about strong to severe storms that could be headed our way for Thursday in isolated spots, but certainly definitely a possibility. And then, of course, we're cooling down from 80s later on this week back into much cooler air. We'll tell you how cool we're going to get coming up in just a bit as well. So first things first, we have to talk about, of course, our satellite imagery, what we're dealing with, of course, around the region. We have quite a bit of active weather for sure. That water vapor satellite imagery is showing quite a bit of problems over portions of the country, and that's something we are definitely going to be watching. Of course, right here in that water vapor satellite imagery, I'll highlight for you what's coming out of the Great Plains. This is the big thing we have to watch right in here. It's ejecting out of the Great Plains. It will eventually be moving its way a little bit further to the north and east over the next few days or so, and that's what's going to cause a whole lot of problems. Already a tornado watch in place for portions of Oklahoma, portions of northern Texas, portions of southern Kansas, for strong storms that are set to develop on into that general area this evening. And so that's kind of the first thing that we are expecting out of this event here. Let's look at watches and warnings. Flood watch is in place for a good chunk of the WSAZ viewing area right now. That's until 8 a.m. Sunday. Goes into effect, by the way, on Thursday. This is a 4-day flood watch that's in place, this green area. And I'll tell you about all the counties that are impacted by that. That's, of course, Magoffin County, Kentucky. That's Morgan County, Kentucky, Rowan County, Kentucky right here. We're also looking at Lewis County, Carter County, Boyd County, Greenup County, of course. We're looking at Lawrence County, Kentucky, Lawrence County, Ohio, Scioto County, Ohio, Pike County, Ohio, Jackson County, Ohio, Vinton, Athens, Meigs, Gallia County. Also Wayne County, West Virginia, Cabell County, Mason, Putnam, Jackson, West Virginia, and Wirt County, West Virginia, under that flood watch, again, until 8 a.m. on Sunday. Why we're seeing this is because of all that is coming our way. This pattern is a very stationary pattern. We'll show you what I mean here. I want you to notice where the stronger portion of our jet stream is, further off to the west here. Of course, that's off to the west toward the Kansas area. We'll highlight that right in here for you in this red zone that we're looking at. Again, that's further off to the west out toward Kansas. Notice how this doesn't budge. We're going to continue to see this kind of just meander over in these general directions and stay with the cooler air that's further to the west and the warmer air that's further to the east. And we're going to have to continue to watch this as it develops on in. There's that cool air we've been talking about. Meanwhile, hot air further to the south, and we get this moisture that will stream on in from the Gulf, and that will allow for the development of some of this rain that will just continue to stream on in for the remainder of the week here and into the weekend. So quite a bit of moisture headed our way. And then, of course, we have to talk about what we always talk about here on First Alert Plus, that converging air that will rise up and over a front here. I want you to notice this is at the low levels of the atmosphere, the very fast wind right here coming in from the Gulf, right in here. And notice how it kind of hits a wall, setting up over near that I-64 corridor right here. That's some cold air to the north. And so this moisture coming in from the Gulf is going to lift up and over that boundary with the converging air coming together. It has nowhere to go but up, and that will drive some heavy precipitation. It's not just showing this on the European model, by the way. It's also showing this here on the American model. Again, we'll show you. Now, the American model is a bit further to the north, especially on Friday, but it continues to illustrate the same kind of deal. We have this boundary setting up right about here with the moisture streaming in from the Gulf and lifting up and over. North of that boundary is where the widespread rain is going to be. To the south of that boundary is where those storms are going to be. We've been talking about the severe weather threat. We'll get to that severe weather threat in just a second. But first, again, the flooding threat is going to be the biggest issue because we're going to have days and days of rain just falling on top of each other. And certainly, again, it will be something to be reckoned with as this front stalls out. So there's the stalled out front we've been talking about. Again, the moisture lifts up and over that front, and we see widespread precipitation developed out of this. So let's track it. Let's move forward. Again, we're dry for the most part over the next 24 hours or so. Could be an isolated storm to the north of US 50 tomorrow, but outside of that, we're looking fine. It's once we head into Thursday where we're going to see this widespread rain develop into mainly southern Ohio right here. So there's that rain up here. Meanwhile, we're stormy to the south. Those stormier conditions will produce the stronger storms we've been talking about. The rainy conditions produces the flood threat we've been talking about. So kind of a dual risk and kind of a split risk over much of the WSAZ viewing area too. This is from the Weather Prediction Center. Excessive rainfall outlook. In this yellow you see right here, that is a slight risk of excessive rainfall. So pretty good risk of flash flooding. Meanwhile, back here in this red, that's a moderate risk of excessive rainfall, even higher risk of flash flooding. Last time we had a risk that high, by the way, was back on February 15th and 16th, where we had all the flooding down in the coal fields. Now, the good news is the impacts from this, at least the flooding concern, are going to be in areas that have not seen a whole lot of high water concerns and flooding concerns this year. Remember, of course, a lot of the flooding happened down into the coal fields on February 15th and 16th. This would be an Ohio issue. Bad news is, of course, we're going to see some high impact rain headed our way, and it could cause some minor to significant flooding, and especially some of those smaller creeks and streams and tributaries into the Ohio River. So for minor to significant floods, we'd be talking about places like the Scioto River right here. Of course, minor creeks and streams and portions of Vinton and Jackson and even out into Lawrence counties in Ohio. And then, of course, the Hocking River, which is over here in Athens County. That's what we're watching very closely, is that general area up into Ohio. And it's something that we are very concerned about. This is what the European model's putting out here. Notice a good 2 to 4 inches of rain over the area. And I'll show you the American model too. We'll kind of get a model split. But the general trend is that the heaviest rain is along in north of I-64, along in west of I-79 here. But that 4.6 inches in Athens, 4.1 inches in Portsmouth. Remember, this is over a 4-day period, so we're not going to see this all in one. That may help quash it, but still, you're seeing potentially moderate to significant flooding in those areas where you're seeing that 4-day total of 4.6 inches of rain. Meanwhile, a little bit less concern further to the south, although Huntington could see some minor flooding here or there, especially on Thursday and Friday, where that front sets up. And remember, it's still up in the air where this front sets up. That front could be 30 miles to the north of where this is tracking it, could be 30 miles to the south of where this is tracking it. We are not exactly sure just yet, but I do think over the next 24 hours we'll have a good handle on what this event is going to bring. Meanwhile, let's look at the American model. Again, most of the rain is expected to be up into Ohio here. Let's move beyond that pause. Now, this is showing a little bit more high impact rain totals. I don't think we're going to see 8.5 inches of rain in Portsmouth or 6.18 inches of rain in Parkersburg. Just note the general trend of where the heaviest rain is, though. Again, along in north of I-64, along in west of I-79. Most of the heavy rain is up into Ohio. So the biggest flood threat is going to be for those tributaries into the Ohio River. The Scioto River, of course the Hocking River, and the small creeks and streams in portions of Vinton, Jackson counties, Lawrence County, and Gallia County in Ohio. Further to the south, your flood threat goes down. However, further to the south, we're talking about some other threats moving on through. That would be the severe weather threat. I mentioned how the cold front comes through on Wednesday. It stalls out over the area. So south of this front, just to the south of this front, right in here, is where you're going to have to watch very closely for the potential of stronger storms. And there is a slight tornado threat with this as well. I'll show you where the front sets up. We'll compare different models here. You'll notice on Thursday the tightening of that temperature gradient right in there. We're at 72 on this particular model in Huntington, meanwhile 61 up in Athens right here. So we're talking about a front that's going to kind of split the region here. And just to the south of this front, where you're still in the 70s and 80s, is your best bet of seeing those strong storms as this front kind of advances further to the south and east here and brings about more active conditions into the area. Now, the different model is showing different solutions. Again, watch this front sag a little bit more to the south, and on this particular model, the North American mesoscale model, notice areas along corridor G. See the best risk. So again, it's still very up in the air. I ultimately think your front is going to set up somewhere, and bear with me while I find the cold front. I think your front is going to set up somewhere right in here by Thursday morning and by Thursday afternoon. So your severe weather threat is basically only confined to areas in Kentucky and in West Virginia. Ohio, you're not seeing the severe thunderstorm threat. You're seeing that flood threat. Of course, the severe thunderstorm threat is going to be in Kentucky and West Virginia on Thursday, and that's where you're going to see a whole lot of those issues here. Going back to our high-res rapid refresh model, the first model I showed you, I want you to notice where the highest energy for storms is. This is a measure of the amount of energy an air parcel, when it rises, can really tap into, how fast a storm can rise and produce some active weather. In this blue zone, right in here, where you see those darker purples, the blues, the indigos right in here, in that red circle that I just drew, that is going to be your highest thunderstorm energy, right meshing with that front that's kind of popping up. And you'll notice, again, near or just to the south of I-64 is where that biggest threat is. Meanwhile, again, that North American mesoscale model pushes this a little bit further to the south. That is a trend we had from this morning. If you watched me on midday, this was kind of pushed further up to the north. Now it's a little bit further to the south. But there's still ample energy in here for any storm that goes up along that front to really tap into and develop some stronger characteristics over the area. So that's kind of what we have to watch out for in the meantime. So let's head to the computer. We'll give you a more in-depth analysis here on what we could be seeing. Our computer, again, shows us kind of the more technical info that we talk about, and I'll dive into it right here. So this is our measure of that potential energy. Of course, this dashed line, the further to the right of this red line that is, the more energy you're going to have. We really have to watch this imagery, though. This is a measure of winds and the way they're going as you go up in the atmosphere. When you get an upside down U like this, that tells you that there's winds not only turning with height, but it's also increasing speed with height. That means a storm can really tap into some rotation. And we could see one of these storms produce maybe a spin-up tornado. Same thing showing on the North American mesoscale model here. We'll go to that. A little bit less in the way of that curvature, but it's still showing the same general feeling of that you could see some rotation gathered in the storm that pops up because of that energy, and that rotation may start to cause some hail in a storm, may cause even a spin-up tornado in a storm. Certainly worth watching as we head into Thursday. The good news is that severe weather threat is going to be very isolated because that front is only going to tap into some of that moisture over a very isolated area. So we're not going to see any widespread severe weather outbreak. Nothing like we saw April 2nd of last year, but something that will be isolated over the region that we will definitely have to watch and could cause some hail, some damaging winds, and maybe a spin-up tornado. We're watching that very, very closely. And of course, we'll continue to keep you updated on where exactly that front will set up, because that is going to be the important thing in terms of both that flood threat and, of course, that severe weather threat. So that's another thing we are watching. Of course, this is from the Storm Prediction Center. We will continue to give you updates on their outlook as well, and their outlook for the area is, again, calling for slight risk, a level 2 of 5 of severe thunderstorms within that yellow zone. That does include the entire WSAZ viewing area. Again, the placement of that front is just too uncertain at this point to nail down an exact time frame. Wherever that front sets up is going to be just to the south of that front. It's going to be over a very narrow area where that severe weather threat will persist. Meanwhile, you're talking about an isolated tornado threat. Can't rule it out. The threat's low. It's very isolated. But also an isolated large hail threat and some scattered damaging wind gusts from storms that do pop up on Thursday afternoon. And of course, the flood threat is going to be the most widespread thing, and that's going to be mainly up in our northern counties into southern Ohio. So we're watching that also extremely very closely. A dual threat. Thursday's more of the strong storms. Friday, we're talking about flooding over the entire area, widespread. Of course, Thursday we're seeing the flooding all day as well, up into Ohio. But Friday, the flood threat sags just a bit to the south near I-64, where you could see an inch or two of rain in Huntington and Charleston. And the flood threat does continue for Ohio. So just a flood threat for the first alert weather day on Friday, storms and the flood threat for our first alert weather day on Thursday. Again, we're watching this very closely. We will keep you updated as needed. Beyond this cold front, we are talking about a cool down. Next week, the cold front finally crashes through. Look what happens going into the beginning of next week. It gets cold. We are seeing temperatures plummet down into the 50s as opposed to those 80s that we are going to see later this week. And with that, yes, we could even see a little bit of white stuff trying to mix on in the mountains. I will clarify that, only into the mountains. Lowlands will be too warm. But you'll notice some of that white stuff kind of showing up here. And yes, we could even see an inch or two of snow up toward Snowshoe, up toward Randolph County and Elkins. Fayetteville, Summersville, probably a dusting. We'll see. Ultimately, though, lowlands just see rain, but much cooler temperatures. You'll see this. We're cooling, again, from the 80s down into the 40s, so it's not going to be the most ideal feeling all around the region. Look at those 50s becoming 40s and 30s going into Tuesday morning. Not fun weather over the area indeed. So bundle up as we head into the beginning of next week. Of course, it is still spring. We tend to get those cold snaps as winter comes to an end and we start to see the warming conditions try to take over, but they're not going to do a good job of that, at least at the beginning of next week. Of course, this is First Alert Plus. We continue to give you updates on any active weather that could be impacting our area. And if there's no active weather, we go to where the active weather is. We spotlight where the current conditions are and the weather headlines all around the country. We do this every Tuesday, 6:45 p.m. on WSAZ's digital platforms, on Facebook, on YouTube, of course, our Roku, our streaming app. Anywhere you could find us on digital, you can find First Alert Plus. In the meantime, if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, remember to like. If you're watching on YouTube, to subscribe. Watching on Facebook, definitely share this. We'll continue to keep you updates on all of the events that could be headed our way. In the meantime, I'm Nicholas Snider. Make it a great Tuesday.